Some memories seem to have faded with time, lying dormant for years. Yet, with just a single moment, a small keepsake, they can come rushing back as if they were never forgotten. Eleanor Harper, a 72-year-old woman, had lived a quiet life after her husband's passing. Her children had grown up and moved away, leaving her with days filled with solitude, cups of tea, old books, and fleeting memories. But one day, as she was cleaning out her attic, an attic thick with the dust of time, she stumbled upon an old wooden box. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid, and in that very moment, time seemed to slow. The objects inside were not just lifeless trinkets. They were fragments of a past that had never truly been put to rest. A story of a lost love, a fateful decision, and a man who had vanished from her life over 50 years ago was about to unfold. Eleanor Harper sat motionless in her armchair by the window, gazing out at the garden behind her house. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the lush green grass, but all she felt was an indescribable emptiness. It had been 2 years since her husband, Richard, had passed away, and since then her world had grown quieter than ever. Days drifted by slowly, revolving around afternoon tea, old novels, and brief phone calls from her children, who were too caught up in their own lives. Today, she had finally decided to clean out the attic, a task she had postponed for years. The space smelled of dust and aged wood, filled with boxes stacked high with the remnants of a lifetime. Eleanor carefully pulled each one down, wiping away the thick layer of dust before opening them. Most contained nothing more than old photo albums, faded clothes, and a few childhood toys that had once belonged to her daughter. But then, in a dimly lit corner of the attic, she spotted a small wooden box with delicate carvings on its surface. She frowned. She didn't remember ever seeing it before. Curious, she knelt down, gently lifting the box and brushing off the dust that had settled on top. Her heart began to beat faster, a strange sense of anticipation creeping over her. She opened the lid. Inside were small but deeply meaningful objects. An old train ticket, a faded photograph of two young lovers standing by a riverbank, and a letter, its paper yellowed with age. Eleanor picked up the letter, her hands trembling as she unfolded it. The ink had faded slightly, but she recognized the handwriting instantly. Samuel. The name struck her like a wave crashing against the shore. Her breath quickened as memories flooded back. Golden days of youth, long nights filled with laughter and music, and a promise that had never been fulfilled. She closed her eyes, feeling as if she had just opened a door she had kept locked for half a century. This box, it held everything she had tried to forget, but at the same time, it carried the very things she had never been brave enough to face. Eleanor clutched the letter tightly, a whirlwind of fear and longing swelling in her chest. Perhaps it was time for her to find the answers. The summer of 1968, Eleanor Harper was just 20 years old. Charleston was bathed in golden sunlight, its streets lined with towering oak trees, and the air carried the rich aroma of freshly roasted coffee from quaint little cafes. Yet, no matter how vast the world outside seemed, Eleanor's life was confined within the rigid expectations of her strict family. Her father was a well-respected lawyer, and her mother was a traditional woman who dreamed of her daughter marrying the perfect man, meaning someone wealthy, prestigious, and with a secure future. Eleanor had grown up with unyielding rules. No late nights, no friendships outside the family's approval, and above all, no love affairs without their consent. And then Samuel appeared. He was a musician, often playing his guitar in a small cafe Eleanor frequented whenever she managed to slip away from home. Samuel had long chestnut hair, bright, dream-filled eyes, and a deep, soothing voice that could make an entire room fall silent just to listen. Unlike the polished young men her family introduced to her, those with stiff suits and hollow smiles. Samuel possessed a free spirit, a soul burning with passion for music. Eleanor fell in love with him the first time she heard him sing. They began meeting in secret, walking along the riverbanks, talking about dreams and life. Samuel always spoke of New York, a place where musical dreams could come true. He wanted to go there, to play on grand stages, to write songs that could change lives. And he wanted Eleanor to come with him. "We leave tomorrow night," Samuel said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "I bought the train tickets. All you have to do is say yes, and we'll leave this place behind and start a new life together." Eleanor knew it was a bold decision, but it was also her chance to escape a life that had already been planned for her. She said yes. That evening, she packed a small bag, hiding it beneath her bed. Her heart pounding as she imagined the future awaiting her. But as she was about to slip out of her room, she noticed a letter on her vanity. It was from her mother, the handwriting shaky with emotion. "My dearest, your father is very weak. You won't say it, but I know he needs you now more than ever. If you leave, you may never have the chance to see him again. Please, I beg you, stay. I can't face this alone." Eleanor felt her world collapse. She stood frozen, torn between love and duty. She was ready to leave, but the image of her father, a stern man but one who had always watched over her, twisted painfully in her heart. If she left tonight, would she regret it for the rest of her life? As the clock struck 11, she knew she had to make a choice. Tears streamed down her face as she folded the letter, tucked her travel bag back under the bed, and turned toward the window. Outside, the night was still and quiet, but somewhere out there, Samuel was waiting. But she would not come. The next morning, Eleanor went to the train station, only to find the platform empty. The train had already left. Samuel was gone, and he never came back. Eleanor sat by the window, the small wooden box resting in front of her. The old keepsakes from 1968 remained untouched. The unused train ticket, her mother's letter, and most precious of all, a faded photograph of Samuel. He stood there, guitar in hand, his smile as radiant as ever. Memories flooded back. She wondered, what had happened to Samuel after that night? For years, Eleanor had tried to forget the past, convincing herself that staying in Charleston had been the right decision. But now, at 72, she realized there was still an unfinished piece of her story. Where had Samuel gone? Had he made it in New York? Or had he long forgotten about her? She needed answers, an unexpected companion. Her granddaughter, Lily, was a passionate young journalist. When Eleanor told her about Samuel, Lily's eyes lit up. "Grandma, you were in love with a musician, and you never tried to find him?" Lily asked, excitement in her voice. Eleanor shook her head, gently running her fingers over the old photograph. "There was no internet back then, and I didn't have the courage. I thought, maybe he had already forgotten me." Lily smiled. "Well, I think we should try. Do you want to?" Eleanor hesitated, then slowly nodded. Following the trail, they started with an online search. Lily typed in the name Samuel Green, but the results were overwhelming. Too many people with the same name. "I'll try a different approach," Lily said, digging through old newspaper archives in an online library. Finally, they found a small article from 1972. Samuel Green, New York's rising folk star, with his song Lost Train touching the hearts of many. But much like his song, he, too, mysteriously vanished from the music scene. Eleanor held her breath as she read. Samuel had once been famous, but then he disappeared? Lily kept searching and came across an old musician directory from the 1980s. In it, there was an address linked to a small cafe in New York, a place once known as a haven for wandering artists. "Grandma, he might still be there," Lily said, eyes filled with hope. Eleanor looked down at the old train ticket inside the wooden box. This time, she wouldn't miss the train. Arriving in New York. The grandmother and granddaughter arrived in New York on a crisp autumn afternoon. The city was vibrant, a stark contrast to the peaceful charm of Charleston. Eleanor felt out of place, yet strangely excited. The café they were searching for sat on a quiet street corner, its wooden sign faded by time. Inside, the space was cozy, bathed in the soft glow of warm yellow lights. A small stage stood in the corner, where an old man was playing the guitar. Eleanor's heart pounded. The man on stage, his hair was silver now, but his face still held the features she remembered. And when he began to sing, Eleanor felt as if time had rewound itself. It was Samuel. He sat there, still playing music, but he was no longer New York's rising star. He was just an aging musician, performing for passing strangers. As the song ended, Eleanor slowly stepped forward. "Samuel?" The man looked up, his aged eyes widening in shock. "Eleanor." After more than 50 years, they were face to face again. Eleanor stood still, her heart racing as if she were that 18-year-old girl once more. In front of her was Samuel, the man she had once loved, now aged, with silver hair and deep lines on his face. But his eyes were the same warm brown that had once made her fall. Samuel set his guitar down, staring at her as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The small cafe around them seemed to fade into silence. "Eleanor, is it really you?" His voice was raspy, trembling. She gave a soft smile. "It's me, Samuel." In that moment, neither of them knew what to say. 50 years of separation couldn't be erased with a simple greeting. Behind Eleanor, Lily quietly stepped back, giving them space. Samuel gestured toward a small table near the stage, inviting her to sit. She did, folding her hands in her lap, trying to steady herself. Memories revived. Samuel studied her for a long time before letting out a quiet chuckle. "I never thought I'd see you again." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "I didn't think so either. But I searched for you, because I needed answers." Samuel leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Answers? After all these years, you still want to know?" She nodded. He fell silent, as if deciding how much to say. Then finally he spoke. "That night, I waited for you at the station, standing in the rain. I waited until the last train left. But you never came." Eleanor clenched her hands. "My mother wrote me a letter, begging me to stay because my father was gravely ill. I couldn't leave." Samuel nodded slowly. "I thought you had changed your mind. Or maybe you never loved me as much as I loved you." His words cut through Eleanor like a blade. She looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "That's not true, Samuel. I loved you. When I missed that night, I regretted it for the rest of my life." Samuel let out a sad chuckle. "Then why didn't you look for me after that?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "At the time, I thought, maybe you hated me. Then I got married, had children. Life just kept moving forward. But in my heart, you never truly disappeared." Samuel was silent. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "After that night, I decided to go to New York alone. I played in small bars, eventually got the chance to sign a record deal. I was famous for a while, but..." He stopped, as if debating whether to continue. Eleanor leaned in. "But what?" Samuel looked down at the table, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "I wasn't happy. I always felt like something was missing. In the end, I left the big stage and came here. In this cafe, I can play music the way I want to." Eleanor felt her heart ache. Samuel had everything, yet he gave it up. But for what? Was it because of her? You never married? She asked. Samuel shook his head. No one could ever replace you. Eleanor held her breath. His words rang out like a love song that had never faded. A second chance. They sat there for hours, sharing stories of the years they had lost. Eleanor spoke of her life. A loveless marriage, her children, the loneliness that followed after her husband passed away. Samuel recounted his wandering years, the songs he had written but never released, the long days spent with music and memories of the girl he once loved. Finally, as the night grew late, Samuel looked at Eleanor and asked, "What will you do now?" Eleanor took a deep breath, then reached for his hand, the first time in over 50 years. "This time, I don't want to miss the train." Samuel smiled, but this time, there was no sadness in it. "Then stay here with me for a while. Will you?" Eleanor nodded, and for the first time in years, she felt her heart grow warm again. An ending or a new beginning. They could not turn back time, but they could write a new chapter together, the one they should have had long ago. And in that small cafe, every night, there was an old man playing the guitar and a woman sitting quietly, listening with a contented smile on her lips. Eleanor sat by the window of the small cafe, watching Samuel on stage with his familiar guitar. She had been here for a week, long enough to realize that while time had passed, some things never changed. His voice, the gentle melodies, still had the power to make her heart tremble, just like they once did. But at the same time, Eleanor had come to understand a truth. Samuel had his own life, a world she had never been a part of. He was no longer the young man he once was, just as she was no longer the girl willing to give up everything for love. They had walked separate paths for too long, and though their reunion had been beautiful, it could not undo the years they had lost. That evening, when Samuel finished playing and walked over to her, he already knew. "You're leaving, aren't you?" he asked, his voice as soft as a passing breeze. Eleanor nodded. "Yes, I think it's time." Samuel sighed, but he didn't argue. He understood. "I'm glad you came, Eleanor. If you hadn't, I might have never known why you didn't show up that night." She took his hand, a gentle touch, but one full of meaning. "I'm glad I found you too. We can't change the past, but at least I can leave with peace in my heart." They sat in silence, with only the quiet music filling the cafe. There was nothing more to say. Everything had already been spoken. The next morning, Eleanor boarded a train back home. As it pulled away from the station, she looked out the window, feeling lighter than she had in years. She had lived with regret, with unanswered questions. But now she had her answer. Sometimes closing a door doesn't mean the end. It can be the way to open a new chapter, one where the heart is no longer bound by the past, but free to move forward in peace. And in a small cafe in New York, an old man still played his guitar every evening. But this time, when he sang an old song, it was not with sorrow for what was lost, but with a quiet, tender remembrance of a woman who had once walked into his life and had finally found her own path.
Thank you for listening. See you in the next stories. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to get updates on new videos. Thank you.